So the section,
Okay.
and so that's the context. Well, I see there's something popped up on the screen here. There we go. And so that's the context with which I write this paragraph in the reflection. Even though I was not angry with God in my head, in my heart, I wanted God to do more. A part of me that my learned theology tried to push down questioned God. My heart theology invited the questions to rise. I'm learning that the God of my understanding welcomes our questions, even our accusations, along with our anger, frustration, and disappointments. Some questions will never be answered, yet God knows that for my own sanity, I need to keep asking them. I believe that God has some explaining to do. Without doubt, there is no faith. So anything that resonates with you in that reflection, have any of you ever gone through those times where your head theology and your heart theology have been on a different page? And what was that like for you? And how would you describe that in your own example? And how about that idea, without doubt, there is no faith? There are some who say that when you doubt, you're showing a lack of faith. And I believe that without doubt, there is no faith.
Well, I think you people are want to just get an understanding whether it's death because of AIDS or any death for that matter, of why that person is being taken away or why that person was taken away. You know, there's a saying that goes, no one knows but time, be ready. You know, what your time is,
Mm-hmm.
just be ready. And so that's why they say cherish each day, because the only one that knows our time is the man above, and nobody else knows our time. And so you cherish each day, you do the best that you can. And even when expected, it's still unwanted, for
Mm-hmm.
someone who is like in the case with you, Reverend Dwayne, your partner passed away, and you knew that was coming, but it still wasn't any less painful. So I get it. Um, it's just a part of life that there's always going to be that void because that person meant so much to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dale. Any other sharings on this idea of how our head theology and our heart theology are sometimes on different pages, or they interact in ways that can be a little dicey sometimes?
Yes. When I read this earlier, it made me think about Cynthia and cancer, which was another autoimmune disease. Even though that I knew it was imminent, I still kept praying that God would do a miracle, and I wanted God to do more. But when I look back on it, I wanted God to do more to keep her out of pain, but
Mm-hmm.
also
Yes.
realized that when I look back on it, I wouldn't call it selfish. At that time, there was a conflict. I thought it was being a little selfish to want her to stay here for me too. But there was a conflict there. I was angry, but then I understood that God took her out of her pain, and that's what she was praying for, take her out of her pain. But and I recall being angry too, because I said, God, you're able, just why couldn't you let her take her out of the pain and let her live on earth a little bit longer. And that it didn't happen, but then miracles happen in so many other ways. Because I was reading through the whole thing, it brought to me closer, because I'd always tried to distance myself from death. But somehow or another, I've come to see it was a transition to a more peaceful place. But still, there's that physical void that's there. And
Yes.
in the question that you were talking about, without doubt, there's no faith. And I really like that question, because it's almost like two sides of the same coin, heads and tail. You can't have the tail without the head, or vice versa. So
Yes.
without doubt, I think doubt brings our faith into question. When we doubt, then it's like it's a point where, what I say, it's a point where it's a point where it looks like you step back and look at, and I try to measure my faith, but then I realized that if I just have a little faith, but still, if I didn't have that little faith, doubt wouldn't exist. I'm going to still ask questions.
Yes. Yeah. Good. Yeah. God can take them. God can take our questions. God can take it and God can dish it out. We can take it and we can dish it out. That's right. Thank
Yes,
you so much. Yeah, God is not fragile.
so
So
true.
God can take our questions and you know and she'll just work right back with us. Yeah. And if you take a moment to notice and take a breath of fresh air, you might smell her perfume as she's whizzing around. So
Sometimes I can almost see her standing there laughing at some of the secret joke that we would have, and I
yeah,
find myself laughing, like
yes.
about my hair. All the time she was living, she said, "Cut your hair short, cut your hair short." And I said, "No, no, 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 no." And so sometimes I can imagine her saying, "You had to wait till I leave to cut it, didn't you?" And I just bust out laughing. So she's still dear and near in my heart.
Yes.
Well, this was one of my, again, assuming whether you read it or not, this book is our attempt to share important moments in our time on the planet. But I would like to bring back, assuming someone watches this or reads this 25, 50 years from now, God of our understanding talks about how we are trying, we're not always successful, but we're trying to create a space where people can share events in their lives, but also share who God is to them and what God means to them and their understanding about who God is. And I can't speak for my pastor, my friend, my reverend, my spiritual community group, but I can say this, that this space that we were trying to create, that we are creating, that I hope we continue to create, is a space where people can share their doubts.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and the big and here is that our definition of faith includes doubting,
Yes. Yes.
which which may be different from how you were raised, what your parents taught you, what your other pastor said, or your reading of the Bible, or whatever. And I want to say here now that for you to be willing to say, I love this man. It broke my heart that he died. It also broke my heart that people wanted me to be cheerful, and I didn't feel that way. And I wanted to say, and again, I'm not speaking for you, but that you thought that there was a disconnect with who you were as a pastor and who you were as a person and how you really felt. I think that's just freaking amazing that not only would you be willing to share that, but that it speaks to the human condition. We can feel two things at once. They don't have to agree. They don't have to be logical, and they don't have to make sense. And when you're upset, in pain, and grieving and pissed with God and everybody else, I'm going to offer you that it would be normal for you to feel that way. And I can say I've been coming since April 2015. Okay, we're almost up on 10 years. And the courage that I have seen here and the conversations that I've heard here, whether they're in secret or private, I hate it when people say, I'm gonna tell you something, but don't tell nobody. And I must go like, la, 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 la. But don't tell me. Go tell somebody else. Or when they say that, what they're really saying is that they're anticipating that you're going to be mad at them, or you'll be disappointed, or you shouldn't feel that way. So when someone says to you, my heart is breaking, the love of my life is dying, I am pissed at God, the doctor, everybody else, and I would give anything, I would die for this person. I would rather, and Reverend Dwayne knows some of this. I have a friend right now that said to me, God, take me, take me. Do not do this to my grandbaby. I've lived a long life. He shouldn't have to suffer like this. Do you know what it sounds like for have a person to say that? But at the same time, this person is a great person of faith, and a person who's been with me through not just years. This is somebody that I've known for over 40 years. But in the same breath can say, I ain't going nowhere. It's not my time. But if I have to suffer and I have to go through the death or the suffering of my loved one, my child, God, will you please come help me with this? So back to what, again, if you haven't read this chapter, we're going to do two things. We're going to make sure that you can listen to it. If you haven't read it, I will send it to you. I'd love for you to, write it out. But each chapter, we will have an audio version so that you can listen. I would love for you to listen to Dwayne speak about the love that he has for this man. Okay. Where his ashes are. I'd like for him to read that. But if he doesn't want to, I will read it or somebody else will. So I want you to see, again, the audience that I don't know who would be listening, that it is possible to grieve. It's possible to feel two things at once. It's possible for God. What did you say? God's not fragile? Like
Yes,
he's
God is not fragile.
the tree, whoever God is it to you today. So that's the other thing, God of our understanding. I suspect that the God of your understanding, Clara, Dwayne, me, when I tell you I've been missing my mother this week, I can't even put into words how much I miss my mommy. I smell her. I am wearing this because it was hers. This was hers. This was hers. My mom's been dead for a long time. I still got her clothes. What's wrong with me? But I feel close to her. And if you see someone suffering, can you pray and say, God, take them away from here. Get on the big bus. Let them go. But I also think, and again, I don't want to take up too much time, but I purposefully could have been two other places tonight. And then when I said, Reverend Dwayne's going to come and he's going to read this. I really wanted to share with you that this is so much what I'm feeling, this ability to feel two things at once, and it's based on who you believe God to be. Did God punish? Again, I'm not mentioning any names, but I have heard pastors stand up in church and in a hospital, almost lost my job over this, and say, well, clearly you were punished because you were sinning and you put your dick where you shouldn't have, and but not me, it's God. When I tell you I almost lost my job, my boss had to pull me out of the room because of what I'm not a violent person, but it wasn't pretty what I said to that person. Who would say that to someone as they're getting ready to pass and say, well, I'm a representative of Jesus, and Jesus is just pointing out to you that you deserved it. So going back to what I was saying, part of it is your belief about punishment, who God is, and we have become so disconnected from death. Not only are we afraid of it, we don't see anybody handle it, practice it. When was the last time you saw somebody die? When was, your puppy, a plant, and we separate it. So when it happens, we think that's God's punishment. And then the next thing that I really want to say is that I think it's normal. I think it's appropriate for all of us to feel at least two things at once, and to maybe be embarrassed at how we feel. Have you never been embarrassed about, like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that? Or I can't believe, like, have you ever seen somebody in the street get mad at their kid runs out into the street, and then they beat the shit out of them right in front of the cars? They go like, the kid's like, I should have run in front of the truck because my mother has totally lost her mind. So you do stuff and you have the opposite reaction of what you thought you would do, and then you're embarrassed because people witnessed it. So I hope that you will read, and that you all that are listening to him reading will think about a time in your life when you felt a certain way, how you've changed and how that has changed the relationship with the God of your understanding, or maybe it's gone away completely. So I just want to thank you. Thank you so, so much for being willing to put that out there, because the book, that chapter in particular, I know has spoken to other clergy. And I think it's given them not only strength, but also to say that at different times of your life as a pastor, as a clergy, that maybe you can't be there for somebody else if you're not there for yourself. If you don't have a good relationship with God, don't be selling God to somebody else. So I just wanted to share that I did get that feedback from some people.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
And I'll be happy to do a reading at some point for the audio. You just have to work out the timing and
Your
make
spare
sure
time.
I've got my lozenges nearby, because a certain medication I'm taking right now, sometimes just out of nowhere my voice will start to crack and stuff. So moving to this next little section, it's about how God showed up. This is at the top of page 103 in the section God Promised Grace and Humor. John's pain at times was excruciating. It hurt me to see John hurt. God brought us together, and now it was evident that death would separate us, at least physically. At one point, I prayed out, God, how are we going to get through this? The response was immediate. I'm not promising you it will be easy. I do promise you grace and humor every day, and I promise that you will never be alone. So it was immediate when I called that prayer out. It's not going to be true for everybody. Sometimes people call out and the response takes time. It was crystal clear that God promised three things: grace, humor, and I would never be alone. And the night of John's passing, it's a two-story house. If you've seen the parish house in Richmond next to the church there was probably 25, 30 people in the house that night, including his sister. Now we knew that his sister Janet and I both got the sense, because John was hanging on well past what they thought he would. And we talked about it, and we both got the same sense that John wanted to physically basically be alone when he passed. And so we went down to the lower level, and he was upstairs in our bedroom. And then I went up and checked on him every 30 minutes. And when I went up at 9 o'clock, it was clear that most likely when I came back up at 9:30, he would have passed, which is true. But the prayers were going up. There was just, like I said, 25, 30 people who were there in the house. Now I talk about a couple of examples of humor here. One being the apple pie story, and uh, but there was one I didn't put in. I didn't put in here. John's sister Janet always came, particularly on Sundays, so that I could preach and do all that needed to happen at church. And so she would sit with him during the worship services. And Janet was known as a talker and wonderful, wonderful support, wonderful person. And the day he died, he was showing very little movement, but we were still talking with him. We knew that his spirit was listening to what we were saying. And at one point, I said, John, we're all here and we love you. Do you know who's here? And he had not hardly moved at all. And he lifted his hand and he went, he knew that Janet was there, the mouthy one. And that was one of the last movements that he ever made. So literally, there was some kind of humor every day, whatever it was. As I mentioned about the apple pie story, because of medications, sometimes a certain food would sound good, and then he would taste it, and it wouldn't taste good, and that kind of thing. But one thing that consistently tasted good to him was dill pickles. And he said, I'm going to die anyway. I might as well have bad breath. And but the other thing was they were saying that those dill pickles had too much sodium in them. And we're like, he's gonna die in a week. Who cares if his sodium is high? And we talk about grace and how God's grace showed up. And it is one of the stories that I share here is that one of the persons who came and sat with us was one of the retired women of the church whose name was Grace, who had a very rough exterior, but she would come and sit with John sometimes for several hours so that I could run errands. Or one time she said, I'm going to sit here for 4 hours. You go see a movie, do something to get out of the house. And she was like that. And she brought this little tiny, I think I have it nearby. I should have, I think I do. I thought it was, well, I meant to bring it. It's a little, was a little crystal clown, little tiny thing that had holding balloons. And there was a mantle on one side of the room, and the window was here, and the bed was there. And I put that little clown on the mantle to where it kind of caught the light, primarily looking at the little clown looking out the window. Then I left and came back. And what happened was when I came into the room, those little balloons on that clown caught the light and sent a rainbow, a splash of a rainbow across the room, including John's face, and his body was covered in a rainbow. And that was an example of the grace. And so I think the question I would ask for this section is how has God brought you laughter and humor during difficult times in your life? How did laughter or humor show up? Is one question I would ask.
Well, while you all are thinking about what you want to say, I just want to say I really appreciate laughing. I mean, when you're telling us stories, because I think that that's one of the things that I thought growing up, that if you're sad or something sad has happened, you can't laugh at the same time. There can't be anything funny about it. And the fact that you were able to laugh and also to have John home with you. I don't know if that's the first person that you ever got to witness dying or what that meant, but a sense of humor about it doesn't feel sacrilegious to me or inappropriate. Even now it eases my own grief. And I've actually been with a lot of people who've died, family members and strangers. But one of the things is that the ones where people laugh or say funny stuff, it really does go, I don't want to say easier, but it's very authentic, to the moment. And when you were doing this, you know, um, he wouldn't have wanted to hurt. I mean, I don't know him, but he wouldn't have wanted to hurt his sister's feeling. But he probably knew in doing this that everybody
Oh,
would know what he was talking
yes,
about. And
yes. She laughed. I mean, she knew she was a talker, so she was not offended at all.
yeah,
I think she was honored that I think she was honored that one of his last acts of humor was directed to her.
was making fun. Yeah.
It's
And
making fun of her. So
and you told
Janet had no issue with it.
yeah. Well, when you told that story, I was with my grandmother when she died, and she had a great doctor, and we had planned for her to die at home. We planned a lot of deaths recently that, you know, didn't quite go as we planned, but grandma's went really well. And so this doctor, she had known him for, well over 10 years, and he was very close to her. And he came over and he cried, and, he told me that it was really close. And he said, I need to talk to you in a minute. And I said, what is it? And he said, um, my grandmother's name was Lois Craig. And he always called her Mrs. Craig. He said, Mrs. Craig told me that there's no way that she can die if your mother's here or in the room. I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And he said, she told me this a while ago. I haven't been able to tell your mother, but I think she's ready. And he said, I don't know what to do. What's your suggestion? I said, you don't know my mother because I don't tell my mother what to do about anything. Are you kidding me? And so he said, well, you pray and all of that. He said, figure it out, because as long as your mother's hanging around here, I don't think she's going to be able to go. And the funny story, we still laugh about it. The funny story, she had not been talking much, not been eating much, but every once in a while she would wake up and say something. Or she said, I know, the funny thing she used to say all the time toward the end was, I know heaven is my home, but I ain't homesick. And them people that's waiting there for me, I don't know if I want to see all of that. We just thought, oh, what a horrible thing to say. And then she would go back to sleep for a couple of days. So she woke up and she said, my mother's name was Violet. She said, Violet, I need some peaches. Can you go to the store? My mother jumped in her clothes and ran to the store. And I'm telling you, before she got to the Giant, which is the Giant right near the church, my grandmother had gone. And I was so glad that the doctor had shared that with me, because I knew that my grandmother wanted to go, but there was no one that my grandmother loved more than my mother, than her daughter. And I knew that she couldn't leave. And so when my mother got back with the peaches and everything, I said, Ma, she said, what? She said, I got to go fix these peaches. I said, no, you don't. Or the kids will eat it, or I'll eat it. I said, Grandma left. She said, dang, really? Well, she asked me to go get him. Why did she ask me to go if she was going to leave? And I go like, oh, maybe she thought I wouldn't be able to handle it. Do you guys want some peaches? And she all these peaches. But I'm just saying, when we tell the family story, it's funny. It's not sad at all. And I just, for my children who were there in the house, they don't fear death, which is good and bad, but they have a very different idea about death because of that. And so your courage in telling your story allows me to tell mine, and share the balance. So thank you for that. And that's what I will I will treasure not only about the book, but about the relationships that I have with people now that I know some people think that, Jackie, you shouldn't laugh at that or you shouldn't make fun of that. But that's how I handle some things. Thank you
Yes,
for reading that. That's great.
yes. Other thoughts? Yes, I think
Um,
Joanne unmuted. Come on in, Joanne.
when you speak about humor, um, my father um, passed in 2008, and he had pancreatic cancer, and it was a very short window of time from the time that he actually got the diagnosis to the time that he actually passed. 6 months, 6, 7 months, and during the time when he, was in the hospital, um, well, there's two things. One, um, he wanted he wanted to be he wanted his face shaved, and my ex-husband and I, we were together then. We were still married. Um, I don't know why he couldn't make it for some reason. I think maybe he had to work or something. So, Dad, I'll go ahead and do it. So, why? I didn't know anything about shaving the beard. Oh gosh. And here I am, try because I was like, I don't want to cut him, I don't want to hurt him. And I'm like, and it his nickname for me is Jody. Jody, you are taking entirely too long to shave me. Come on and hurry up. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, Dad. Okay, okay. But oh my gosh, I just thought that was the most funny thing because I was nervous. And he's just laying there just as nice and everything. And I think he was so patient. And I think he probably was like, this child is taking way too long to do this. Get on with it. Hurry up. The other thing was, uh, this was, can't remember exactly. He was in the hospital, but I can't remember exactly the timeline. But you know how they'll ask you questions, like, what's your name, what's your birthday, what day is it, do you know what day it is, those type of things, and who's the president. And my father, now we're sitting there, with him and everything, and he says, um he couldn't get out the whole thing, but he said, Obama. And we turned and looked at him, and the nurse kind of looked like, oh. And my sister very quickly said, Daddy, not who you want to be president, but who is president now. And he said, oh, Bush. And we just died laughing. The nurse laughed, and we just all laughed about that. And it was like, oh my gosh. just and he did not live long enough to vote in the general election. I think he voted in the primary, I think. But I just thought that was the funniest thing. And one other thing, then I'll be quiet. My mother passed away 2 years ago, and my mother was a pistol.
Mm.
And of course, as you get older, you have no filters. And I guess it was about a week before she passed, and I went to see her, and I was like, well, I'm going to do your hair. Let me do your hair. And well, first of all, she was in bed, and they said, well, your mom's in bed. So she's laying there. And so then when I come in the room, and then she was like, she's ready to get up out the bed. So she was like, oh, no, no, no. I want to get up. I want to get dressed. Come on. And then so I had to go around and say, Miss Dorothy wants to get ready and get dressed. And she wants to sit up, and she wants to get in the chair. She don't want to be in bed anymore. So the young lady comes around to help her. And my mother's like, hurry up. I'm like, Mom, you stop fussing with that young lady. She's doing the best she can. She's trying to help you get ready. She's like, I know, but hurry up. And they were like, she was like, Miss Dorothy, I'm coming. I'm trying to help you. It's okay. It's okay. But I was like, oh my gosh. Now you went from laying there in the bed like, oh, this is it, to fussing because the lady's taking too long because you want to get up and you want to get dressed and you want to sit in the chair and be comfortable and everything. But oh my gosh. So that was the last time I actually saw her alive. And it was just the funniest visit. I'm doing her hair and she's fussing about um I guess I was taking too long because I was trying to plait it and I was just like, oh God, and trying to, make it look pretty and just, make her feel good and put lotion on her hands and feet and all that stuff. But yeah, she wasn't a patient person. So it was kind of like, come on, I'm ready. So just, so, those little moments of humor that I
Yes.
remember about my parents, and I still laugh because even though we knew with my mom that she was 98, so we knew that it was just going to be a matter of days. And so, preparing yourself and everything. But even in that, in the knowing that, knowing that it's time and everything, but just the humor that she displayed, even in those last days and the no filters and all of that, but she still had that. And it just makes me chuckle whenever I think about those things.
Thank you.
And stuff. But God bless her and my daddy, because
Yes. Thank you so much. Humor is a gift from God, and those are some of those memories that are love prints, indelible love prints. So beautiful. The final section is under the theme God promised to heal, not to cure. Despite the best efforts of medical teams and prayers from family, friends, and MCC people from around the globe, John was not cured. Yet, God kept the promise of healing. It happened in so many ways, including the ability for John and me to talk about death, even befriend it. This healing was tender, and we were free of fear. Our tears were prayers, and at several moments we were crying and laughing at the same time. And then the other healing was John's long time prayer to be able to hold his nephew Hunter, and that happened, and I was there to witness that and to see the transformation of John's brother, who was homophobic, and something shifted during this time. But I'll never forget Hunter. That's one thing John wanted before he passed. And then I close with one of the MCC affirmations during the peak of this crisis was God is greater than AIDS. It became popular globally, was adapted by many churches from other denominations, and even showed up on signs and t-shirts at pride parades. God is greater than AIDS. I believed it then, and I believe it now. God kept and keeps God's promises. The grace is there always in small miracle moments and promises kept. Thought I had all the tears out. I thought that Sunday as well, when we were talking about the children, I had a lot of tears between last Tuesday and then heading into Sunday. I thought they were all out. And then when I got to the section in the sermon about the children, they just, there they were. And so, what are your thoughts on the differences or the intersections between healing and curing?
Repeat that again, please. What is
Just what are the thought of the difference between healing and curing?
I knew my dad was not going to be cured. I remember asking the doctor, I said, well, can you operate? Can you remove the tumor? You know, can you do chemo? Can you do radiation? What can we, you know? And the doctor said, they said, we're not going to win this one. And he said, we can't um,
Yeah.
do, you know, really the only thing we can do is some radiation um, and, you know, and everything. So he wasn't cured,
Mhm.
but he was healed
Yes.
because the healing came when he was released from the physical pain, the great physical pain that he was in. So the cure, not everything will be cured. Some things, yes, some things, no. But I believe that everything can be healed because healing comes in different forms. And whether the healing comes physically on this side or on the other side, that there still is a healing, and the healing is greater than, I believe, a cure.
Yes. Thank you.
Mm.
Yes, Clara, come on in.
Oh, I was just thinking about after I read this about healing and listening to different people talk about healing and curing. I recall now that Cynthia she grew up in a tough household
Mm.
where she was deemed as the black sheep of the family at the time. They weren't too kind to her, and being a lesbian really was, she was ostracized in all ways. So when she and I got together, the family started warming up a little bit, but I think now listening to Joanne and Reverend Dwayne and others talk about healing, uh, Cynthia wasn't cured. And I remember the last 2 weeks of her life when the doctor said, radiation, nothing is going to help.
Mhm.
But when I look at it, there was so much healing in the family. Uh, Her mother was already dead 2 years before she was, but brothers and sisters came together, and the two that was the closest
Mhm.
to her, they're even very close. And I'm thankful for them today because that we stay in touch with each other. So it was a healing that brought families together.
Yes.
Yeah. So there was
Mhm.
healing in that process because when I look back on some of Cynthia's poetry, well, most of her poetry, a lot of it had to do with the unit, the family unit and everything. And I think uh, she's happy looking down to see that her family is really closer together with each other, and I'm a part of the family. I'm still a part of the family, so I'm really blessed when I look at it that way. So, like God said, He never leave me alone, and just when I think I'm alone,
Mm.
God shows me that I'm not alone. There are so
Yes.
many people around that I can love upon, and they love upon me. And I just see this period. One time I was wanting an intimate, but I believe that I would have gone into the intimacy and not looked at God the way I needed to at the time. So it's like I feel like instead of God forsaking me, He just put me on hold until I oh boy. Until
Yes. Mm.
I can handle the answers or the non-answers, but
Mm.
still move on forward. So
Mhm.
I'm so thankful for that.
Mhm.
Mm.
I'm struggling with how to put what I want to say in words. So I want to ask for your grace for this. But when I was in nursing school and then later in midwifery school, they talked about the difference between healing and curing. And it made absolutely no sense to me. I mean, they told us. But now that I have a spiritual practice, and I have a spiritual family that I can talk about these things, I realize that for me, healing means to make whole, to have everything uncovered and being laid out. And I don't want to say acceptance, but healing is to not reject any part of it, and to do that with love and grace. And cure, I think for a lot of us means, oh, you're going to fix this, it's a boo-boo, you're going to cut it off, and it's going to get better. And I think one of the things that you always were sharing, not just with HIV or AIDS or cancer, that I have witnessed extraordinary healing. Um, like you said, I can't put it into words, but before the person passed, to be able to see someone heal and to come to terms and have families change and be transformed, I think is really not just cool, but it's profound. It's prophetic. It's amazing to witness. And I think that when I was taught that, I didn't know about it because I hadn't witnessed it yet. But that once you see, it's like once you see it, you know what it is. And the other thing that both of you said about healing is that what's healing for one person may not be healing for somebody else. That you know, that term, the bucket list. Like if you have a list of things that you're on your bucket list, somebody else can say, I want this is on my bucket list, and these are the things that I want to do. And no, you can't do that. You can't eat salt. You can't have dill pickles. You can't, do whatever. But for them, it would be healing. So I appreciate being able to witness this and witness the testimony that you all are given around healing, because we see healing happen all the time. And
Yes.
it's not, I don't think our eyes are trained, our ears,
Mm-hmm.
we say eyes cannot see, ears cannot hear. Just what a blessing that is. And I think
Yes.
you all have a lot of courage, not just because you've sat through it, but because you've shared your grief with us. And, like I said, today I really miss my mom.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
2000, you said 2007, your dad died. My mom, um, one of her dying wishes, I didn't know it was a dying wish. She says, I have to be in DC. I have to be at the inauguration for my baby. And I was like, well, what about me? Her baby was Obama. She wanted to be there for the inauguration. And you talk about the last time that you see someone, she was on her way to be there, and she died the day before he was inaugurated.
Mm.
And so your telling of the story wasn't sad, but it helped me to remember that there were things on my mom's bucket list. And at the time I said, he's not your child, I'm your child. I want you to do. And she's like, child, please. I got things to do, people to see, things to go. And and for them, imagining seeing not just a Black president, but seeing what they thought was extraordinary change in their lifetime, that meant a lot to my mom. And you sharing that story is, I just want to thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Really
you, Joanne.
so honored to
Yes.
hear that. Healed,
All right.
healed, back here, healed,
Yes.
made whole.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all so much for your presence. And we'll go ahead and close tonight. Did you have any announcements tonight, Dale?
Just a reminder that this Sunday we're going to do the children's toy drive, non-gender toys for kids between ages 0 to 4. You know, not a boy, not a girl toy, just a toy, unwrapped. Okay, so please, and older adult ministry potluck that's going to be on the 8th of December. To remember to sign up if you haven't already for a dish or help or wherever you could do. You know, I will not be there this Sunday. Danita's sister husband passed in North Carolina, and we'll be heading down there. So I will not be there, but I'll be making my way to making sure that things are balanced and I get everything done, you know. Before I leave.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you. And our prayers are with you and Danita for traveling mercies and with Danita's sisters, family and friends and all impacted. And so we're going to continue to offer encircling prayers and prayers for the pilgrimage. Just receive another breath tonight. Oh God, we say thank you. Thank you for all that you've taught us and for all that you have yet to teach. Keep us open. Continue to expand the eyes of our hearts that we might know healing, that we might see the miracles all around us, that we might become increasingly full of your wholeness and live into that wholeness and share it. Amen. And so it is. Amen.
Man.
All right. Thank you so much. Night, night.
All right, everybody. Have a good evening.
Right.
Thanks.